the people in your neighborhood, in your neighborhood, in your neighborhood? Say, who are the people in your neighborhood? The people that you meet each day.
Hi boys and girls, welcome to Turn the Page Tuesdays. So now that it's almost time for bed, make sure that you take care of all of those bedtime routines. Parents, now's the time to pause your device for the children to be able to go ahead and do that. Hi boys and girls, tonight or today we are with Mr. Steve Roberts, and Mr. Roberts has a very interesting hobby, and we're standing behind one of the automobiles that he collects. An automobile is a car. Mr. Roberts, how are you doing?
Great, good to see you, Dr. Campbell.
Good to see you as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your collection?
Certainly.
And how you got involved in the collection of antique cars?
Certainly. Well, ever since I was young, I've enjoyed cars, and I've studied them as time has gone on. And I'm a mechanical engineer, and so I like mechanical things, right? I also like seeing how the cars have evolved over time, and we can talk about that a little bit with this. So this is a 1923 Model T Ford. Henry Ford started the Ford Motor Company in the early 1900s, and his idea was to be able to make a car cheap enough that every family could own one. And so he worked very hard to reduce the price of the cars. So you'll see, for instance, there's no windshield wipers, there's no radio, there's no heater. In fact, when this car was made, you couldn't start it just by turning the key. You had to hand crank it, and we'll do that in a minute. And so the Model T was really the first car for many, many families, and it replaced a horse and buggy, is how they would have gotten around before. And so the roads back then were very poor, muddy and rutted, and so the wheels on this are tall and skinny to be able to travel on those roads. And so Dr. Hamburg, I really enjoy learning about how the cars were then and how they've developed. And so I've read to learn about that, and had to read manuals to understand how this car works.
So, boys and girls, Mr. Roberts talked about a lot of things. The Henry Ford is somebody who you will study probably in 4th grade, so that is really cool. And he also talked about, look at the differences between your parents' cars and this car. There's no windshield wipers, there's no radio, there's no CD player, there's no GPS, Bluetooth. There's nothing like that in here. And that is pretty incredible. And the reason why, do you remember what Mr. Roberts said? It's to keep the cost of the car down. So there's not a lot of high-tech things here.
One of the other things to keep the cost down, there's only one door. This is not a door. The door...
We'll come around this way.
The door is on this side. And you might say, well, how many doors do you need? So it has one door. The other thing he did to reduce cost is there's no gas gauge. And so, to know how much gas you have, that's the gas gauge.
And where would you
stick.
put that?
The gas tank is here under the seat. Gas tank is under the seat. You dip the stick in, and I have almost 6 gallons of gas.
So that's really different from how you power cars today.
Yes.
You don't see mom and dad lifting this car seat to put the gas in the car, and it's not electric. So
And so, to start it, it's a little bit more involved. So, Dr. Hamburg, if you would get in the car
Okay.
and move some of the controls as I hand crank it, we'll get this thing started. So, with these early cars, they couldn't be started just by turning a key. And so, to start it, it's a little bit more involved. In fact, you have to crank the engine over with a crank on the front, and we'll show you how to do that.
great. And the other thing that Mr. Roberts was talking about was the reason why some of these cars don't have all of the features like the windshield wipers and the radios and all of that is because this is one of the first cars that was ever made. They didn't have any comparison. So there wasn't another car that they could say, oh, I'm going to make it look like this one because this is one of the originals. So that's the reason. Do you remember or do you recall reading what the cost of one of these was back?
Yes. When they started building the Model T, they were about $1,000, but he worked to get the cost down. And this 1923 Model T cost $269. In today's dollars, that's about $4,300. So many families could afford a Model T Ford.
And how much is just a basic car going for these days? Do you know? Just a basic.
You can probably buy a car today for $25,000.
25,000, and this is in the 200s. So you know how you're studying about quarters, nickels, dimes, and pennies? It's a lot more now than it was back then. So, boys and girls, Mr. Roberts gave me a lot of direction when the camera wasn't running on how to actually start the car and keep the motor going. And I want to know how you learned all of that, because while the car looks really cool, there's a lot that that goes into how to actually get the car moving.
Yes, so I've read a book about this. I've watched a YouTube video about it. I took a course at the Antique Auto Club Museum in Hershey, and then I recently took another course at the Auburn Heights in York Lynn to learn about the Model T and how to drive it and how to start it.
So, boys and girls, there's a lot of schooling that goes into this particular hobby. There's a lot that goes into this. It's not just about the actual car, but how to make the car move. There's also a lot of fascinating things, because if you went to if you went to purchase one of these, you would have to know how to do all of this. One of the things that Mr. Roberts shared with us is that these right here are oil lamps. So you can't just drive around at night. You have to have oil in the base, and in here there's like a candle wick. So that's pretty fascinating. There are a lot of interesting things about this car and about this hobby. You know, the Roberts have about eight antique cars that they have right back in that garage. And now we're going to hear a book read by Mr. Roberts. It's called Cars by Patricia Hubble.
This is Cars. Start the motor, turn the key, compact car or SUV. Cars go rushing up and down, through the country, through the town. Convertibles and limousines, packed with waving, giggling teens. Taxis swerving, dodging, beeping, families hailing, shouting, leaping. Police cars darting, passing, dashing, sirens wailing, bright lights flashing. Fire chief's car, bright shiny red, hook and ladder, up ahead. Cars with 2 doors, cars with 4, cars with stick shifts on the floor, cars with horns that toot and blare, cars that big dogs like to share. Race cars roaring around the track, numbers painted on their back. Station wagons, hot rods, vans, jeeps, delivery cars, sedans, racing, rushing, honking, squealing, stopping, starting, turning, wheeling. Garages where mechanics work, fixing cars that stall or jerk, greasing axles, checking tires, engine, carburetor, wires, radiator, muffler, lights. Everything must be just right. Add some oil, pump some gas, clean the windshields, dirty glass. Fasten seatbelts, off we go. Fast, fast, slow, slow. Whizzing here, cruising there. Cars can take us anywhere. Mountain, desert, farmland, shore, lake, and forest to explore. Pack your toy cars in a row, pick one out, and off you go. Make a road around your room. Zip, turn, stop, zoom. Cars go north, south, east, and west. And then they rest.
So, boys and girls, not only does Mr. Roberts collect antique cars, and he was a mechanical engineer, but he is also the president of the Oxford Educational Foundation. And parents, for those of you who are watching, the foundation supports students and teachers and the school community through mentoring and tutoring, and also through purchases, which you'll be able to read in the annual report that comes out in just not too many days. So look for that. But this is Mr. Roberts once again, and he is also the Oxford Educational Foundation board president. So, boys and girls, Mr. Roberts, do you ever drive in parades and show your cars?
Oh yes, I have. I was in the first Friday car show in September in Oxford.
So if you ever see Mr. Roberts around town and he's driving in one of his cars, or even if he's not, give a wave hello. He's a neighbor. I hope you enjoyed that book by our special guest. Now it's time for bed. Good night, everyone. We'll see you in the morning.